I got an antique wheelchair about 30 years ago. Let's see, maybe even longer than that, and renovated it. It's still in the living room. It's from the Civil War. So there's something about wheelchairs that's there. And
How did you receive it?
found it at an antique shop.
But it called to you in some way.
I actually had two. Lori made me give away one of them, and she'd love to have me give away the other one too.
Do you remember what drew you to it? What made you decide to?
Well, biomedical engineering, man, this is pretty good example of a biomedical problem that was solved with a mechanical solution, and it's all wood and wicker. It's right out of the Civil War. I mean, it's just
Fascinating.
It's crazy, yeah. But you go into Mariners and you park your car and you look around the parking lot and you said, "There's more money in here in this parking lot. There's enough money in this parking lot to solve major problems in the world."
Huh.
So, why don't I come up with some idea that I can use their money for? So that was one thought.
Okay.
Another thought was, there's this woman I remember trying to crawl across a dirt road in Morocco. And, it was pretty appalling to see that, dragging somebody, human being, and being ignored by everybody else, and how she was not even acting like a human being. It's almost like an animal crawling across the road, and that's never seen anything like that before. So that had something else to do with it, I'm sure. But I've someplace around here I still got the notebook where I was doodling things, and then all of a sudden there's this wheelchair, and I started thinking about why is that complicated? That chair that I have in the living room it's made out of wood, but it's just four wheels, and I knew enough about wheelchairs to know that the good ones are expensive. So, let's look into it. So I started to do some research. The internet was just coming to the point where you can actually use it at that point. So figuring out who makes wheelchairs, what do they charge, who sells them, where do they go, how about in developing countries, because that's where that woman was, in Morocco. And
What year was that when you were there?
it was around in 79. This is 10 years later.
Right. Or
20 years.
20, yeah.
Then as I start to see there's groups that are actually giving out wheelchairs, and a lot of them are in California, so let's go knock on their door and see what they do and how they do it. And I got a pretty good feel for what they were doing, and none of the solutions seemed like the right way to go, although I had to really applaud them and affirm them for the amount of effort and commitment they had to try to solve this problem.
Were these all nonprofit organizations?
Yes.
Yeah.
And spending decades of their life doing it. But then when I added up all the wheelchairs they had given out, all of them around the world, I came up with a number of about 100,000, which seems like a lot of work. But then when I added up and kind of averaged out people's estimate of the number of people needing them, it varied from 20 million to 130 million. So I just figured, why not just pick 100 million? And if you did, then 100,000 divided by 100 million is 0.1%. And so, if you have any long-term idea of dealing with this goal, you're not going to do it by the way you're doing it. I would have loved to be one of those 100,000 people if I needed a chair to get one, but what about the other?
But this sounds like the same problem-solving mentality that you always had, right?
Well, yeah, in a sense, yeah. Because in medical disposables is what I was kind of steeped in. You figure out how to do things cheap enough so you can throw them away when you're done. So I got really good at getting the cost out of things. And just figuring out what's the minimum that it has to do so that you can get the cost down. And then, so what's the minimum that you need for a wheelchair? And the name has the ingredients. It's not like it's a big let's see how inexpensive I can make a wheelchair and still have it be functional. So you go to Toys R Us.
So this is a new challenge.
Yeah. Get some bicycle wheels, because I read in Scientific American about 20 years ago that bicycles were the primary form of transportation
in the world.
So I'm thinking, wow, that must mean there was bicycle wheels in probably all these countries, and then so I called the wheelchair manufacturers and how much would they sell me your wheels for, and it was big, what do you want them for? But $100 would be about the minimum you could get one for, and you go to Toys R Us back then, you could get a bicycle for about $40. And you think of how many people have made money between Toys R Us and the manufacturer, and you had to think those wheels probably cost a few dollars only to make. So let's go with bicycle wheels, and then chair. The least expensive, most durable, functional chair in the world is a white resin lawn chair. So Home Depot is right next to Toys R Us. Get some toys, a couple bicycles, and get some chairs, and then you get some conduit, because I didn't have the technology to actually bend and weld steel, but I could bend conduit and make it a frame. I made one, and looked like a pretty good prototype. Sat around for about 5 or 6 months, and then finally got enough nerve to call the missions pastor at Mariners Church and ask for an appointment. And he said, "Come on over Thursday." And I'm thinking, "Wait a minute, church has got to be closed Thursday. Aren't you guys just open on Sundays?" That's how naive I was. And so I go to visit him on Thursday, and he's all over. He thinks this is a great idea. He took it for a ride, and I didn't want him to sit in it because I didn't think it would hold up, but he did. And as he was testing it out, a couple of people walked by who had just come back from a mission trip, and looking at it, and he says, "Man, they could have really used that where we just were last week." So he encouraged me to move forward, and so I did. What I was wanting to do was prove a point that an inexpensive, durable, functional wheelchair would be efficacious. That was a word I used a lot because I had to get things through the FDA, and you prove efficacy. So after this meeting with Mariners, he and Skip Langfried, who was a pastor there, encouraged me to go to the next step, and so I made 100. Although I got a proper steel frame this time, and they sat in the garage as kits for a good long time, and I didn't know where to take them. So finally there was an opportunity to go on a medical mission for doctors and nurses to India, and I didn't even want to try it because I'm an engineer, and I can't practice medicine, and so I'm surrounded at this first meeting with all the skills of medicine you can imagine. And then there's this engineer who can't help them, and then he wants to bring 100 wheelchairs with him. And all they wanted to do is bring syringes and antibiotics and vitamins. And so they weren't very supportive. And I couldn't answer any of the questions that anybody with sense would ask, because first of all, it doesn't look like a wheelchair. Secondly, you've got this kind of, well, they wouldn't use the word harebrained, but you want to test this, but what if it did succeed? Who would pay for it? Who would assemble it? Who would make it? Who would give it out? Where would they be made?
So they wanted all of these answers.
And I said, I just want to prove that this would work. I don't know any other answers. Leave me alone. Why is this? Why are these questions needed to be answered at this point? Because I wanted to take it one step at a time. Let's just prove that it would work first, and we'll answer these other questions later. But I'm surrounded by realists, and they want to kind of, before they invest mentally, they want to know the answers. So. But there were no answers, so I couldn't give them. So I didn't get a lot of credibility and nor respect because of that. And then the same thing had happened in India when I tried to ship 100, because I was going to potentially I could upset their import exemption by shipping in wheelchairs, and they didn't have a heart for wheelchairs because they had a very busy schedule doing what they already do in India, because it was a Christian mission organization there. And so, it's the callous heart concept. If you can't solve a problem, you don't think about it. You can't solve this problem with these people crawling around on the ground in India, so we don't think about it. So it's not like we're dying to get wheelchairs. It's not even on our list. There are people starving in our country. Why are we worried about wheelchairs? So I finally was able to only bring 4 wheelchairs, and that was because we had 4 passengers, and
each one carried one.
Each one had to carry one with them, and when we got there, I was just sort of the volunteer to help the medical team do their various jobs. And the first job was to go out on a sort of a card table clinic into a suburbs of Chennai, India, and give medicine to people who had probably never seen a doctor before. It was on a Sunday; they could just show up. So I came pretty much just to move boxes and set up card tables, and then at the end I'd put the boxes back in the truck. And but I did bring a wheelchair with me just in case. And going to India with the expectation of getting data, I knew I wouldn't be getting much information from a sample of 4. If you're in the statistics, you can't really do anything, especially if you're talking about research with humans. So at least this will get me a start. I'll get these other 96 out somehow. I'll come back a year later. I'll see how many the wheels are still on and see how people are using it. I'll write a paper, get the paper published. That's what I'm good at, right? Well, the very first wheelchair, I'm sitting here with a clipboard and I'm saying, God, bring me data. And what he does is he brings me passion. He brings me tears, and empathy and compassion and passion. And it's just this overwhelming experience that nobody expected to see a person's and their family change literally in a matter of minutes. And them not believing it was going to be constant. They thought it was a sort of a short-term relief, and then we would take the chair back. And then we had 3 other experiences with the other 3 wheelchairs we brought that were as powerful on a passionate level. And I'm really now confused because everybody all the people that were on the other side of the fence saying, this guy doesn't have any answers, he doesn't know what he's doing. We'll bring him along because he really seems like he really wants to do this, and we can't get him out of here. All of a sudden, did you see that?
They're moved to tears.
Did you see this? Did you see that? What are you going to do next? I've got to get these other 96 out. And then I fly back and go back to the United States, and I go into work. That Monday, I was gone for a little over 2 weeks, and I find out the company was bankrupt. Went bankrupt while I was gone. So they kept me around for a few more months while they were trying to get a white knight to come and bail out the company. So anyway, all of a sudden I got this opportunity to write a resume, which I hadn't done for decades, and maybe relocate, because I was getting to be fairly specialized in what I knew a lot about. But the story spread in Mariners quickly, and I would meet people, and they would quite, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to find a job. He said, what do you mean? You're going to tell them the story? And no, we don't want to know about that. What are you going to do about the wheelchair? And I said, well, I got these other 96, and I got to figure out how to get them out so I can write this paper or do some, carry on. I said, well, can we help you? And help you do what? Can we help you get more wheelchairs out? Do you want some money? What for? For wheelchairs. Do you need some advice? You ever think of starting a nonprofit? No. I'm still the introvert, right? I mean, I'm not. I go to church late, so I don't have to talk to anybody.